Across the Fence, it's our monthly Bird Notes program, and we're going to be talking about getting ready for winter bird feeding. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. As always, on the fourth Wednesday of the month, I'm joined by Mark LaBarr, conservation biologist for Audubon, and we should explain that you weren't with us in December because Christmas fell on a Wednesday, so you got bumped.
I did. So, we're kind of getting ready a little late this year, but that's okay because the Great Backyard Bird Count is right around the corner.
Perfect.
February 14th through the 17th. So it's always good to, get a chance to talk about bird feeding and remind everybody to get their feeders filled up and keep those birds happy, especially with this weather.
It has been a tough winter.
It has. It's been very cold, and, bird feeding is not only a great introduction to birds, but it's a great way to supplement the, the food sources out there that wild birds have.
Right. Where do you want to start?
Well, first off, I wanted to thank Guy's Farm and Yard. They, as usual, every year allow me to go in there and pick and choose from their selection of bird feeders, which is great. It's nice to see that they carry a lot of Audubon bird feeders. So
they do.
That's always good for us. And they also carry a bunch of feeders that are made out of recycled materials.
Even better.
Which is even better. So I think we'll start with our feeders, and we'll go through the usual suspects. The first one is our hopper feeder, which is the one right there on the end. And that's, kind of your classic feeder. It's a feeder that has lots of different advantages. You can fill it with a lot of food. The top on that one lifts off, and so you can actually get the food in there. Yep. You can see how much food you have. In this particular hopper feeder, it's got two suet feeders on the side.
Which is nice, and the top comes out over so that it doesn't get weather on the
so it
suet.
So it doesn't keeps the weather off of that, and it has a large perch size, which allows not only chickadees and nuthatches and stuff like that to access that feeder, but some of the larger birds. It also has a screen on the bottom which lets moisture move through, so you don't get that crud that builds up at the bottom of hopper
junk,
feeders.
yeah.
And then as we move down the line, a lot of people that just start out with a tube feeder. This is the classic tube feeder. It has a nice perch. The birds can access this. It's, again, easy to see all the food that would be in there, so you know when you need to refill it. The disadvantage to the tube feeders, the perches are small, so you're not going to get your bigger feeder. I mean, bigger birds, but that could be an advantage. You have a lot of blue jays.
Right.
Yes,
I do.
So they have a tough time actually getting up on these feeders. And this one in particular is a nice model because the bottom actually comes off. And so this allows for easy cleaning. Which is really important. And oftentimes when you're cleaning, the bottom, again, is that part that is the toughest to get at. And to remind viewers, we recommend cleaning their feeders on a regular basis with a mixture of 1 part bleach to 4 parts water.
Okay.
And again, these feeders are nice because you can do that mixture in a bucket. You can dip them right in the bucket. The hopper feeders are a little bit more difficult.
Yep. And here's another version.
This is another version. This is, again, another tube feeder. Only with this feeder, this is our Niger feeder. And so this is the feeder that has the real narrow little opening there.
Because you don't want all the seed to come out, obviously.
Right, and that's a small seed. It's a great seed for goldfinches. Later in the year, pine siskins will feed off of it. So it's, it's specifically designed for that. Again, this is one that has the smaller perches. You're not going to have blue jays or anybody that big eating the Niger seed right off anyway. Again, with these new feeders, these Audubon feeders, they do have this, all of this green stuff is, recyclable plastic.
And this is nice too because I have one that's a mesh, but when it gets wet, it gets all the seeds wet.
Right, and everything starts to get damp. This little roof on it here keeps it, unless you're getting, which we sometimes do, rain coming in sideways. So those are your kind of classic feeders. Some of the other things that come along with that. Here is a feeder base.
Which would go underneath for dropping seeds.
And that's just for, birds are not necessarily the cleanliness that, they'll go for those sunflower seeds and push everything aside. This also allows for some of the larger birds like jays, cardinals and stuff like that to access the feeder as well. So having one of these underneath your tube feeder is always great. Above the feeders, it's always nice to have some kind of roof. This is a fancy one with swirls.
Which would be perfect for
this, right. This is a platform feeder, a hanging platform feeder. And this, again, would keep all of the seed there pretty dry, drier than if you didn't have some kind of roof over it.
And again, a nice mesh bottom to let the moisture out.
Correct.
Yeah. Excellent.
And you know, and this is important for feeder stations that are on poles that are out in the yard. Some feeder stations that are up under cover.
Yeah.
You know, some of this stuff is not as important. The other thing that this feeder roof can do is sometimes keep our squirrels at bay.
If you're
sometimes, lucky. Right. We do talk a lot about seed. But when, of course, you're talking about a complete feeder setup and you want to bring in a good variety of birds, you want to start thinking about your suet feeders.
Right.
And so I brought in, we've talked about this one before. At first, this doesn't look like a suet feeder, but if you turn it over, you can see that the bottom does have that classic suet grill that you can put your suet chunk in. And what this advantage to this feeder is that birds need to cling to that bottom in order to access that. So your chickadees, your woodpeckers can get at that, but things like starlings and other species just don't have the strength, the foot strength to actually, or toe strength, to hold on to that. And because of the roof, it keeps the
suet nice and dry.
It keeps it nice and dry. A feeder that I found, a suet feeder, which is new to me this year, is this one.
That.
And this one is designed, it's kind of your classic feeder design. But what they've done is they've added this strip on the bottom.
And what does that do?
Supposedly that's to help birds like woodpeckers, since they have that very stiff tail.
Yeah.
It allows them to actually grasp onto the suet feeder better.
Oh, okay, so it braces them.
Yeah, you know,
Interesting.
It's interesting, and I would imagine it works well. Although I haven't come across too many woodpeckers that haven't done all right on the regular suet feeder as well.
That's a new look.
Yeah, but something different. And you know, if you do have hairy woodpeckers, which tend to be the larger of the woodpeckers, having this little tail support might come in handy. One other new thing which I found this year over at Guy's Farm and Yard is this tree icing. Now, it's basically peanut butter and suet, or suet and peanut butter. And you basically take it, and it looks like peanut butter, and you can smear it right on a tree, or you can smear it. They do have some feeders with holes in them that you smear it on, and it gets in the holes. But it supposedly creates kind of an instant feeder.
That was a great idea. If you had kids, send them out in the backyard and have at it.
Right, but you know, at the same time, it is a food source for other things.
Yes.
So you do have to be careful. You know, bears would love to probably come and, you know, lick the tree that has the suet on it. So if you do have situations with bears, this may not be the best, but you know, it's something different out there that you can, you know, folks can use and try, and great for woodpeckers and chickadees and other things that are looking for that high protein suet food source.
Of course, we have our traditional blocks, which are...
Right, you know, you can buy these all over the place, and that's your basic suet block. You know, this one happens to be filled with seeds and berries. Some of them, they're getting pretty...
And do they really attract different species depending what's in them?
You know, pretty much, you know, you've got your species that like these kind of, you know, like the fat and have the ability to access the suet feeder. So, yeah, they do attract some, but, you know, you're not going to get your mourning dove feeding on a suet feeder.
Right.
Or even sometimes a cardinal or something like that. You know, you just, even no matter what you put in there, you're still going for your nuthatches, chickadees, woodpeckers, things of that nature that take advantage of that suet. All right, so we've covered...
we haven't talked about this one yet.
We haven't, and we're shifting into that next realm of feeding, which is how do you feed the birds and not necessarily feed the squirrels. Now, some folks don't mind feeding the squirrels. You know, it's part of the whole process. And some people like feeding the squirrels. But as we know, seed
is expensive. And squirrels are hungry.
Correct. And if, you know, if we're especially using black oil sunflower seed, which is the, you know, one of the best seeds, that is in the upper zone of seed resources. And, you know, I talked to some folks at Guy's Farm and Yard yesterday that were in, and they were having problems with their feeders because they had been using a seed source that didn't have a lot of black oil sunflower seed, and they weren't getting the birds that they wanted there.
Right.
So anyway, we need to keep the squirrels out somehow. And this is one of those feeder types that allows that to happen. I'm going to try to hold it here and demonstrate.
Yeah.
It's one that we've shown before, which has a mechanism on the front which allows you to control how heavy the bird is that actually perches on it.
Now, I have one similar to this, and I set it to keep the blue jays away until we got that really, really cold weather. Then I felt guilty, so I set it back so the blue jays could eat too.
Well, you know, blue jays do need to eat.
But the good news is it has this sort of grid down here, so the seed isn't just in a trough, so it's harder for the jays just to shovel the
and
food
flick
out.
it all around. So, and these do work, and you can adjust the setting on the side here to different weights for birds. So if you wanted to feed a blue jay, but not necessarily something, I guess there's not too many bigger things out there, you could. Whether it works or not, it does. But we have gray squirrels at the feeders at the Audubon, which
figured out.
They can reach right across, and it's amazing what they can do. So, you know, buying a feeder like this that tries to, you know, keep squirrels off. Another one that I've seen, which is kind of interesting. This works on the same principle, but with this one, you can see that as the...
Let's see, turn it this way maybe so they can see.
Okay.
Here's the opening where the bird would land, but if it's heavier,
it
just
goes
shuts
down
it right
and
down.
it shuts it down. So working on that same principle that you're going to, first off, you have the smaller perch, so you're not going to get the jays up there, or some of the bigger birds.
Shuts it right
It's
down.
going to shut it right down. So the Squirrel Buster, you know, and of course, you know, some of the best ways to keep your squirrels off your feeders is just to keep them off your feeders. And so the baffles are always a good way. And if you have a pole design, this is a baffle that fits over a long pole, and it just keeps the squirrels from getting up and around.
Excellent.
Now you just have to keep that pole far enough away from something that they can
jump on.
Right. So
it's a process.
It always is a process with squirrels. And of course, a lot of people do like to feed squirrels, so there are situations where you can provide cracked corn or corn and thing and keep the squirrels away from the expensive food and allow the birds to work on the actual seed, which we can talk about next.
Okay.
All right. So, seeds, what do birds like? The big one, and this is kind of interesting, this is like a block of black oil sunflower seeds. So, black oil sunflower seed and its cousin, striped sunflower seed, is one of the best seeds for all-around bird feeding. Birds come in, they like it, lots of birds use it. If you're going to invest in seed, the black oil sunflower seed is a good one to do. This same couple that I had talked to yesterday, their neighbor had put in a whole new feeding system, probably one of the reasons that they had lost their birds, and they were using black oil sunflower seed. So now
all the birds are over to the
this
neighbors.
couple was upping their game, and they were coming in and they were carrying out a big 30-pound bag of black oil sunflower seed. So black oil and striped sunflower seed is always great. That's what we feed pretty exclusively. Niger seed, this is that really fine seed, and I don't know if we can see it here, but it's the really fine seed that goes into that Niger seed feeder.
Right.
It's you know, very small. And it's something that, you know, if you put it in a tube feeder that would normally have black oil sunflower seed,
it'll fall right out.
Go right through. So this is great, again, for your finches, siskins, goldfinches. That's a pretty standard mix if you're going to go. And then you can broaden out. We have a feeder at the Audubon, which is specific for woodpeckers.
Looks like trail mix.
It does, and you probably could use it as trail mixes if you were in a bind, but it's got peanuts, all sorts of different nuts in it. There's a specific feeder that this fits in that has some big openings that allows the woodpeckers to get in there. And so this is another, you know, just another variety that you can get out there. But I think if you stick with black oil sunflower seeds, your Niger seed, you have some suet, you're going to be pretty set for bringing in a good variety of birds that are out there. You know, if you want to branch out to this newer, you know, and try to do some other kind of feeder stuff, that's great too. It's only going to provide more of a food source for the birds that are out there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, if you have a question for Mark, you can contact him through the staff at Audubon, which is 434 3068, or you can write to him at 255 Sherman Hollow Road, Huntington, Vermont, 05462. Or you can contact Mark by email. His email address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Send Mark your questions and he'll try to find the answers on an upcoming Bird Notes show. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.